Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DCT Recruitment's Icing on the Career Cake. And today we're joined by Rachel. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And whose birthday was it?
It was my daughter's birthday. It was on Saturday. Yeah, I would try to hide everything behind me. So I've done a great job ever.
You can try hard, but we will notice these little things. How old was your daughter?
7. Yeah, I have just got rid of the 7 balloon as well. So yeah, we had a big family party and everyone was round. So she had a great time. So good day all round.
We love a party. We love a celebration, don't we, Diane?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Diane's been celebrating. For anyone that hasn't caught up, Diane's been celebrating because she recently won Strictly. Not the one that you might see on your TV. That's next year when she gets entered into that. But you took part in Strictly for Liverpool Women's Hospital, didn't you, as well?
Yeah, yeah, we did.
How was it?
Do you know what? Out of everything I've ever done in my life, I'd say it was the scariest thing ever. My heart was like pounding. I now know what anxiety feels like before I went on to there. So yeah, it was nerve-wracking, but so rewarding. Like, it was such an experience. And the target was to raise 50,000 and they got like 75k, probably plus. They probably got a little bit more. So they've got the money now to get the neonatal unit that they needed. So it's amazing that they'll be able to improve the hospital and help people who go through sadly like bereaved children. So yeah, it was really good. It was dead enjoyable. It was exciting and scary all in one, but yeah, I'm glad I've done it, and I'll probably keep like doing the dance classes.
Will you? Excellent.
Yeah, because I've never done anything like that before. And it's a good way to keep fit. It's enjoyable, to do. So yeah, I think I'm gonna carry on doing the lessons like to the class that I went beforehand. So yeah, and then Dave, my dance partner, his daughter, she was there on the night. So I think they're maybe gonna do a dad and daughter dance next year. So that'll be quite cool.
So do you have to go back next year to take part or to be involved in any way?
Yeah,
or?
they do something called a show dance. So the people from previous years, while like people are eating the food and they're getting ready for us, they like entertain. So yeah, we'll be a part, if you want to be a part of the show dance, and we'll get to do that next year. And then I have to pass my baton on to the next person that I feel should be able to do it. So yeah, I've got 2 people in mind, so we'll see.
I think what you should do is next year, I think you should go back and you should, like when you have these TV shows where they have like a behind the scenes, sort of talk to people. You should do that. That'd be good. You could volunteer to do that for them. You could do like your own little sort of like, oh, we're here with, and this is them preparing for their dance. And yeah. We'll keep that in mind for 2025.
Are you volunteering there, Graham, to help?
I'd totally volunteer for that. What made it the most scary? Was it having like people you knew in the audience?
Yeah, I think so. Like, because it's something you haven't sort of done, and the pressure's on to do it right for them 2 minutes. Do you know what I mean? There's 500 people watching. They're all screaming and shouting. So when you were practicing, you're in your own little bubble in a quiet room, and then all of a sudden, all these people are there screaming and shouting, and you only get like about 8 to 10 lessons, so it's not like you've done it inside out, outside in. You've done it enough, like, but it's just it was just a bit scary. You probably feel, and you're getting judged. There's 3 judges there, so I guess the competitiveness in you like takes over. Does that make sense? Because you're like, oh, we're gonna get a score. You don't want to get like a 5 or a 6.
Oh, there we go. Now, Rachel, we need to find out a bit more about you. So, for a start, would you do Strictly? Is dancing in your blood?
Do you know? No, it's not in my blood, if I'm honest. Give me a song to sing, and I'll happily get up on karaoke and sing you a bit of Celine Dion out. I'm not any good at it, mind, but I would try it. But do you know what? I think for charity as well, what a brilliant thing to put yourself outside your comfort zone. Like it's amazing, Diane. So congratulations to you, really.
Thank you.
There we go. We might have to get a bit of Celine from you before the end of the podcast.
I don't think you want to hear it.
Is that your go-to, is it?
Yeah, a bit of Celine Dion, a bit of Shania Twain.
Wow.
Yeah, all the power ballads. I'm not gonna lie, you'll find me generally in the kitchen or on the karaoke machine, whichever one comes first. So yeah,
you've got to be able to sing your pick songs like that, Rachel.
Yeah, no, honestly, I can't tell you how bad I am. I think I'm really good, but yeah, but it's all about confidence, isn't it? So.
It is. It certainly is. So what is it you do? Sorry, Rachel.
So what does I do? So I am a HR consultant. So I support businesses that do not have any dedicated HR resource. I go in and support and solve them with their people problems or people challenges. So that's it in a nutshell. Probably the easiest way to explain it.
So you start by going in to see them, giving them a bit of Celine Dion. And
try, yeah.
break the ice.
Yeah, if they'll have me, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I mean, my offering, I suppose, is quite a range. So it ranges from what's called a retainer service, i.e. it's kind of on-demand HR support, i.e. They may employ a good few number of people and they just need that sort of day-to-day support. So someone rings in sick, what do I do? Or someone's made a complaint, what do I do? Or even as, can you draft a contract for me? That kind of thing. And then I also provide support all the way through to more complex HR as well. So, for example, redundancy restructure programs, and that involves sort of scoping that, what that looks like, designing job descriptions, etc., all the way through to delivery, so actually delivering the redundancy program, so supporting employees and the business through those programs all the way through to fruition, and then implementing new structures, new roles, etc. So quite a varied role, if I'm honest. And I suppose it depends on kind of where your expertise lies, but I like a bit of the balance in both, in the kind of the more sort of operational all the way through to more strategic, and in then making sure that the business is set up for success. So,
well, now this is going out around Christmas time, or just before. You talk about helping people, through redundancy and whatever at Christmas time. It is the worst time of year, but it happens so often around Christmas time, doesn't it?
It absolutely is, and particularly when people are looking at budgets, you usually find towards the end of the year is when they're thinking, oh, where are we in relation to our budgets, etc. I suppose what I always think of is generally businesses do not want to go through these programs, but unfortunately in a position where they've got kind of no option. Where I come in is initially there's initial conversations where will be, okay, so what you're trying to achieve here, is it cost saving? Or is it repurposing role? What is it the actual outcome is? And you'll find there are ways that you can potentially mitigate those redundancy programs. So, for example, you can look at pausing recruitment, even asking people to reduce hours. And there are many ways you can kind of speak to businesses in relation to mitigating that virus any impact. If we have to go through that kind of looking at redundancy restructure, so work with the businesses and understanding what that looks like, what is their end game, what are they trying to achieve, what roles is it that they need, and then I can then work through what that means, and I have to work quite closely with business owners to understand what that kind of looks like. For me, the redundancy process and that program is it's very straightforward in the respect of you've got the legalities around that. You must consult with people, and whether you consult with people as a collective, i.e. the unions, or whether you consult and then obviously individually depends on the numbers impacted. However, where I really come into my own is in relation to the people experience part of it. So what is it? What does good look like when you're going through those redundancy programs? Generally, from my experience, is a lot of it is about the communication. So as long as the communication is right, it's like critical to how people potentially leave that business. I also find that they've got to be transparent as to the reasons for doing that. I've worked in previous businesses where they haven't been transparent. We're in a cost of living crisis, in the last couple of years. So if you're not transparent as to why you're reducing the number of roles, people are going to question it. They're going to leave with a sort of a bitter taste in their mouth. If you are quite transparent and say, look, we're in a cost of living crisis, we've got cash flow issues, it's very hard to challenge that. But for me, it's about supporting the employees through what can be a really sort of critical time, and then signposting as well. There are so many opportunities out there, and I know it's a really scary It can feel very, very scary, but there are, businesses can support employees with, getting somebody to come in, maybe help with CV writing. But there's also a lot of free opportunity as well. So Citizens Advice offer free CV writing. There's a lot of kind of business coaches that also offer initial one-to-one support that I do sort of redundancy programs, etc. So it's kind of my advice is, I suppose, if anyone is going through that process, is just to take a bit of time. Don't rush, take the time. And I think the biggest learning is when businesses are making people redundant, it's not personal. You would be compromising my integrity if it was a personal approach to redundancy. It's about the role, not the person.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly important to get it right. And also, when you get it right, it has a really impactful element to it. I mean, I actually spoke to somebody on Friday who's literally just been made redundant, but they had nothing bad to say about the business that they've just left at all. And they said the whole process, they were treated with the utmost of respect. They still had the utmost of respect for the business that they've left, etc.
Yeah.
And that speaks massively towards, a business if they can achieve that. And that is all down to achieving it in a proper processes in the proper way.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rachel.
Sorry, go on, Diane.
Well, it can help people take stock of what they want in life and realize, like, people get scared to change, they fear change. So some people stay in the roles they are because it's comfortable and they're happy doing that, but they're not really fully happy. So it also, it can be a positive. I know the initial news is quite shocking and it's a little bit, oh God, but if you talk through the change curve and you take people through that quite well, and that through going through that is a lot of listening, coaching, giving people ideas. Once they're coming out of it, they probably say, do you know what, it actually isn't really, such a bad thing, because on the flip of that, although at this time of year, a lot of people are looking at the people strategies, the people plans that might be cutting costs, there's also people who are growing who will be looking at that and then, be advertising and be looking, we've already got a few people starting come the 6th of January for like some permanent roles. So there's also the other side of that, which is where like you can team up with people like yourself, do you know what I mean? To like say, well, we've got this on our desk and we've got that, and going back to the CV writing, the biggest thing I'd give people advice is you should tailor your CV towards the role you're going for as well. Make sure that your summary at the top is about the role that you're talking about, so you take the reader to your skill set of that role. Does that make sense? Because some people don't do that and then wonder why they're not getting calls or they're not getting any feedback because the CV doesn't really match the role they're applying for fully. And we pretty much ring most people because I always think it's worth a conversation with someone like as to why you have, but not every company will. So they do need to make sure they're picking up their own skill set and selling themselves in really a little bit, on that summary section.
Absolutely. And I think for a lot of people that are kind of going through that sort of change, generally they go through a stage of anger and then kind of acceptance. Saying that, I have seen, having done many, I can't even tell you how many redundancy programs I've done, this is quite a general statement, but most people do come out of redundancy reasonably well. Sometimes it can come at the right time, i.e. they've been in the role for long enough and the package is that they can go, right, great, thank you very much, and off I go. For some people, it pushes them into a career that they've actually wanted to do but never had the guts to do. It gives them a bit of funding in the background. And for some people, it's just a reassessment of what is it that I want to do, go into a different sector, a different industry, an opportunity. So it can be positive for people as well. But I think that where the negative perception is people obviously losing their job and their income. And let's be honest, we've all got bills to pay, haven't we? So, and that's where the challenge is. But there is a lot of opportunity out there. It's just kind of finding it and assessing it. And I think from speaking to people that have been made redundant, it's just taking a little bit of time to step back and assess really what they want to do. And I said, as my role as a sort of HR, working in HR, is to make sure that process and that transition is as smooth as possible for people, so they've got all the answers that they need, you know, whether that is why is my role being made redundant, all the way through is what does actually my package look like, how do I set myself up for success, like how much notice period do I get, what happens to my pension, you know, all those kind of life questions that you need. That's my role, is to make sure that that transition is as smooth as possible.
Yeah, I think actually the bit that a lot of people miss is that it's actually grieving.
Yep.
When people leave, and I'm not sure that for the person involved it's entirely around money most of the time. I think it's actually more to do with grieving the fact that maybe relationships, you're not going to see people that you've seen every day again. You may never talk to them again, you know. It may be that, you know, there were particular parts of the role, the job that you really enjoy doing, and you wonder whether you're ever going to do those things again. It may even be down to the fact that, you know, in what you did before, it might have given you various life opportunities. You might have traveled or whatever, and you think, oh, no, how am I going to find something that gives me that again? And I think there is a massive grieving process there.
Yeah, and I think that's for, you know, it's 50-50, isn't it? It's the financial aspect, and then I suppose the emotional aspect that comes along with that. But like you say, it's that sometimes not having the structure, you know, the routine, not working with alongside different, you know, teammates that you may have spoken to every day for however long you've worked there every single day. So it is, like you say, it is a grieving process, and some people obviously respond to that better than others. So yeah, and again, you know, for me, the business should then be supporting them on that. It shouldn't just be, we've got this process to go through. It's how can I best put these employees who've generally been committed to doing that role, and basically you're kind of changing their life, you know, change it. And for a lot of people, they don't see it coming. And it's also that shock factor, isn't it? Yeah. You know, a bit of time to process that.
Diane, do you see that when people come to you, you know, and I think sometimes people forget that recruiters actually get very involved with obviously redundancy as well, because, you know, where do people come from that are looking for jobs? They've often walked out of a job, or that job's disappeared for them. But do you find that to some extent, whilst there may be on the one hand a desperation to try and find work, and you've got to make sure that they've got to find the right work that's right for them, but there may be a pressure at home to get money and whatever. At the same time, there may be a loss of confidence, or there may be now a lack of distrust because they've just been made redundant out of a previous position.
You've got to handle them conversations, you know, gently. You know, even if I look back at my own experience, you know, I'd never had an interview since I was 17, and when I decided to change career and move into recruitment, I was going for an interview for the first time really in 22 years, even though I've been the interviewer plenty of times, being on the other side of the fence. So you will have people who've been in them roles for all that time. So, you know, we would, you know, help them come and do like mock interviews, you know, talk them through the process. You know, one thing I always ask my clients is like, what's your 5 key questions you're going to ask in an interview? And I don't do that to like prep the candidate to answer the questions. I do that because if they can't answer them questions, then there's no point in putting them forward to the next job. Because going back to your point where they're desperate for work, people will try and say, but I can do that, or yeah, this or that. And you've got to be quite careful that, you know, you don't just put them through something to put them through, because it's got to be right for the clients as well. You know, yeah, they may want to do that, but if that role's like 4 levels below them and they're just desperate to get work, they're not going to stay. Or it could be the other side. It's like having an in-depth conversation that, well, do you know what, I've come out of this high powered role, I've now got a redundancy pay, I can now afford to take a lower like responsible job, so I just want to be able to, you know, have a bit of an easy time for the next 5, 6, 7 years before I retire. So it's you've got to like peel the onion layers off like an onion, basically, by asking the right questions, but not just once or twice, you know, just a bit over and over again, a little bit when you're touching base with people, because people can change their answers. So putting people in permanent roles takes a lot longer than the temporary positions. Temporary is quite quick and easy and stuff because they need people who an expert in that role to go and give them a lift. But for a permanent role, yeah, you need to have a little bit more in-depth and sensitive, conversations. And going back to your point, Rachel, what we pride ourselves on is being transparent. So having that transparent conversation and saying, well, why is that? Or why is that? And we've had some people go through, and sometimes they can get the interview process and then they put a spanner in the works that they haven't told you, and it's like, oh, well, what do you mean you don't want to work Fridays anymore? Like, we've had 6, 7, 8 conversations, it's never been brought up. How come now at this point? So you also have to handle that as well, but if the clients, we've had that happen and the clients still took people on, because if the right person for the job, then that won't matter, and people can show flexibility around roles, of what they want. So, but you would prefer that, answer a little bit earlier sometimes,
Absolutely. I'm going to test both of you now. Well, you kind of brought it up, so I thought I'll do it. Just off the top of your head, kind of worst questions you've ever heard anyone ask in an interview, and then maybe like the best.
So I think from so being on the side of the interviewer is when I've been in literally my heart sank on my head went in the hands was, are you planning on having children, to a female, which is just an absolute no. Due to sort of discrimination, and despite the fact you might do as much prep as possible, it wasn't. I'm not gonna lie, I literally stopped and said, please don't answer that question. It's just not appropriate. So that's probably the worst I've had from somebody that's actually interviewing somebody.
Oh my word!
Yeah,
I'd expect that of. I'd expect that of Alan Partridge, but anybody else, I mean, goodness me.
Yes, and it wasn't, believe it or not, it wasn't, it
wasn't Alan Partridge, no.
No, it wasn't Alan Partridge, but it also wasn't that long ago either. So, but
it does
expect,
it still does have to get asked, like, how old is the person, quite a lot, and in certain roles, you don't really ask anybody their age, it shouldn't really matter. But, if you look at the CV, you can probably calculate it slightly, so, but yeah, it stuff like that shouldn't matter. It's just about, putting the right person for the job. For me, on a positive part of an interview is, I think, you just need to, say, just tell me about yourself. Just relax people, just what you like to do, who's Rachel, just explain to me what you like, and take the work side of it out of things, because the easiest thing to do is be talk about yourself, really, in some ways, and just relax people, what you like to do, what hobbies and interests you like, before you go straight into, so how are you gonna do your 90-day plan? Just put people at ease and make them feel comfortable, and probably maybe share something that you might be able
and what about from the other side, what about somebody that's going for an interview? Have you ever heard of an absolutely brilliant question where you thought, that has shown such initiative, it's shown a lot of research, it's shown that they really want this job?
I think it's quite telling when you can tell people have researched the business, the company, the organisation. It's usually, I've noticed on your website, I don't know, you've just launched your people strategy example, how are you going to achieve that, or etc. So I think that's quite telling. I always love people that ask about, so tell me what your day-to-day role looks like, because you can get a lot out of people that way. And usually, when you're being interviewed, it's usually somebody in more of a management role, so you can kind of understand, because I think it's so important, and I don't know if you're seeing this, Diane, as well, is culture is such a massive part of candidates. It's kind of almost sort of top of the list almost. I know salary is also important, but culture and making sure flexibility, it's massive now, almost as important as salary. And I think you can gauge, candidates can gauge quite a lot by asking, what's your day-to-day role looks like. What does the culture of the organisation look like to you? But also asking what the challenges are as well, because let's be honest, they sometimes, businesses and organisation can paint a picture that everything's perfect, and then reality hits and they go into an organisation. I think, and like you say, Diane, is the transparency pieces. It's always worth knowing what you're walking into, the good, bad and the ugly to an extent. 100%.
So are we, like, a lot of questions some people now with younger generation will ask, what's the sustainability project look like? What are they doing? Going back to that culture, like what people are looking for are completely different nowadays. What's your core values, what's your mission statement, what is it that the company wants to do and achieve, and how are you going to do that? I think.
Are they asking about things like EDI as well? Are they interested? Yeah.
I've seen a lot of that. Yeah. So EDI is obviously massive, and particularly from the neurodivergent space as well. There's a lot of I suppose in the news about it. There's kind of a lot happening sort of on social media for awareness, and I've had people ask what kind of the onboarding process looks like for somebody that's neurodivergent, because they may have a slightly different process that obviously suits them slightly better. So I think ED&I is a huge one as well. But like you say, sustainability is quite large on the agenda as well.
I think also, like, I had to do a talk at an event and about how we can help people from recruitment. So I put something together called a prepare model for interview preparation, and within it, it's how the company prepare. Like what I was explaining is the candidate's assessing you as much as you're assessing the candidate. So have your receptionist ready. No Graham's coming at 11 o'clock for an interview. So when they rock up, it's like, oh, yeah, you're here with Rachel for an interview, blah, blah, which I could think, whatever it is, and just, thinking about, what does your reception space look like? What messaging have you got on the walls? What do you think about? Because that's your chance to make a first impression as well. No. Making sure that you're not late either for the interview. It's not.
It's a long way from how it used to be, isn't it? Where they used to keep you somewhere dark for ages, and then which looked like a funeral parlor or something, and then they someone would come down and go, "It's your turn." like something out of the Addams Family, take you up the stairs.
It's definitely more of a two-way street these days. 100%. And I think obviously depending what the market looks like as well. I think Diane, you're probably way more experienced in this time, but obviously after COVID it was basically a candidates market, wasn't it? And then I think there's been a slight turnaround in sort of the last year or so, but still I think people are very, very become more aware of what they want and what they want from a role. And I think the interview process, and in particular like an onboarding process, is super critical now, because it can cost everybody. It'll cost the organisation if somebody leaves within 6 months. It also costs the candidate. It costs recruitment consultants, everyone else that's sort of involved in that process.
But there's no point paying, say, someone like ourselves a fee if your own onboarding process and the way you look after someone isn't right, because. And we have to have some of them conversations. I have had to have conversations like that with the clients, the ones a bit more, and because you need to get feedback from the candidate. That's really important to know, because sometimes people think their culture is right and they think that everything's okay, but actually when you dig deeper, it's not so much. There, and it's just little things. I don't know. It could be. Like our type of role, for instance, we might have to we do take calls early in the morning or before work. So, if you're not at your desk bang on 8 o'clock, it's no big deal. Does that make sense? Because you might have been on your phone. Like I ring and candidate to 6 o'clock in the morning to check them on the way to work, whatever. Does that make sense? So I'm not so much of a stickler sometimes for that, but bigger companies can be. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, I've been working here and I've been doing that. You have to have a bit of flexibility, and some people are still very much in the mindset that you just need to go the extra mile 150% to do everything, Whereas the newer generation are a bit more like, well, no, like I get paid 8 till 5 and that's what I'm doing, end of. So who's right, who's wrong? There's always that controversy constantly, isn't it? But we want people who just a bit more committed and a bit more time. But where, you know, as long as the work gets done, you know, if that person can do that in their time, then that's all that matters, isn't it? But some people still get hung up on, well, he wouldn't stay 10 minutes late, or he wouldn't do this, or he wouldn't, do you get what I mean? And you can have that conversation. I'm sure you have that, Rachel, all the time.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those that, like, if you go back to the crux of it, your employment contract says you are employed to do X job between the hours of X and X, usually 9:05, 5:30, right? So that, you know, candidates or, you know, employees are quite within the rights to say, look, I'm not taking a call before 9, I'm not staying until after 5. However, I always think flexibility's got to be a two-way street. So if you're going to be a stickler is at 9 to 5 and that's it, and then you then go and ask if you go and watch your child's nativity play without taking half a day's leave, then you can't. It's got to be a two-way street. And that's where I think, you know, your company culture has kind of got to move with the times. Like, I remember, I think one of my first full-time jobs is if I wanted to do anything like go to a child's assembly, you know, which would be half an hour in the morning, I'd have to take half a day's leave. You know, and that's, you know, that takes time. But there was also a culture of that you literally do your hours and that's it. You are not expected to stay any later. So I think it's one of those is if you do, you know, if you are relying on goodwill or, you know, the extra mile, or you want the extra mile from your employees to make sure, then you've got to then make it work for everybody that's involved.
Yeah.
I think it can get really complicated sometimes because people try to placate people in their narrative and in the way that they talk to them, and further down the line that can get confusing. Okay, I'll give an example. I mean, I think probably one of the biggest examples that I've come across time and time again is people working on a Saturday, right? When their contract says 9 to 5 or 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and sometimes you may be asked to work on a Saturday, and it says that in the contract. And at the interview, it gets brought up, and it's kind of like, yes, well, we do have that that we do ask people to sometimes work on Saturday. It won't be often, etc. And then when it comes around to it, it's almost in that person's head that they don't really need to work Saturday. They're not really going to get asked to work a Saturday. And then suddenly something happens or someone's away or whatever, and they go, you're working this Saturday. And they'll be like, but I don't normally work Saturday. And you know, I'm sure that's one of them. Do you know what I mean? That I think actually that sort of thing gets handled quite badly.
In the interview though, doesn't it? Because I've had that with clients who've said, look, if you don't want to offer hybrid, don't say, you know, don't be like, oh yeah, now and then you can. If it's a no, it's a no, you know. There's no point flowering information like that up, you know. You've got to be honest, haven't you?
Yeah, it's that transparency piece again. I mean, I've seen it a lot where you've got to say people working out of hours and it's, you know, voluntary or discretionary or etc. And then actually they don't have enough volunteers, and then they then try and sort of enforce it. And it's kind of like the best thing you can do is just be upfront and honest. So if you know, for example, in the contract where it says you may be required to work Saturday, is just be realistic about how often that will be. Even if you give worst case scenario, then they can always be pleasantly surprised rather than the other way around. So yeah, I think we are finding it a lot because again, you'll probably see it probably a little bit more than myself, Diane, but in the sense of when you are sort of talking to businesses and they're like, oh, we are hybrid, but actually in reality, hybrid is once in a blue moon. Or I suppose what they're thinking about is some candidates won't even apply for a role if it's 5 days office space.
But then they're right candidate then, are they? Because you're not playing them rules, so you have to advertise it as what it is, you know.
Absolutely. You need to, and there's no point in interviewing somebody that doesn't want to be in the office 5 days a week. You're wasting everybody's time, aren't you? So
on the flip side, that people don't read the job spec either. So we'll advertise it's full-time office, and people ring, oh, I would have thought it'd be hybrid, or I thought, well, some people think like once they start, they can get into being a hybrid role. It's like, so I always make that abundantly clear with everyone. I go, listen, this isn't, and when you get there, it's not going to change. So if that's something you want, then this is not the job for you.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll make the executive decision really there to say, look, I'm not going to put you forward, because it's not fair on the clients, you know, if they're going to try and sell a dream to the clients either, and then, you know, vice versa. And especially with, like, you know, the rules changing, you know, after your first day, and, you know, employees need to bend and be a bit more flexible for people. It's unfair, really, you know. So, you know, you can't have people play the game both sides of the coin, really. Do you know?
Yeah.
Do you know, like we've had stuff where, you know, people have had office dogs, for instance, and like we always try and get out to most of our clients to see the culture and feel the culture, because I feel like for us, that's what sets you apart. Is you can get any skill set, but it's finding the right fit of the person for that company. And I'm allergic to dogs, you know. I was bitten by dogs a lot younger, so I actually couldn't work in that environment because my eyes would be streaming after having antihistamine. But you think I'm probably going to say to someone, well, I've left because you got an office dog? Probably not, you know. So it's just little things like that that people might not realise, like, oh yeah, we always have cocoa in. Oh, isn't it lovely? Well, yeah, it might be for you, but it's not for everyone. And just because the majority of the world do love dogs, the person who's the minority might feel a bit uncomfortable to say, I actually don't like that. Does that make sense? So it's being honest about going back to where you were saying earlier, it's not just the salary, it's the environment they work in. Like, some people won't like it if there's no canteen to make your lunch, or, you know, it's not an easy route to get to for work, because so it's difficult to travel to, because that's going to put an extra half an hour on the day. But there's loads of things that can put people off. And I say this to clients who are moving premises sometimes. I'm like, look, that might be cheaper for your rent, I get that, but that's going to be hard for you to recruit for, you know, because we've done recruitment in that area and there's no transport links, there's no this. So, you know, you then need people who drive, and it's you know, just minimum wage. Not every finding people who can do that is very hard. To really think about what cost implication that's going to have. You know, you really need to look at your business plan and see, you know, where are you going to attract talent from for all them things. You know, your location where you work can be a big thing as well.
Huge, yeah, absolutely. And particularly if there is an expectation of sort of 5 days a week, etc., the lack of transport routes, etc. And I also find, you know, when you're kind of looking at locations, is, you know, generally speaking, is that people are, I suppose, struggling a little bit now also to go into the centre of cities and towns because of the expense of it as well.
Yeah.
And then it's also the transport links as well to maybe the outer city kind of locations, etc. And that is, you know, I appreciate that's where I think businesses, and this is where, you know, when you're having conversations with business owners, is really looking at the bigger picture here. So saying that, like you say, it might be cheaper, but have you got car parking space? Because a lot of people do want to drive, you know, and the transport links, etc., plus the expense of it as well. So I think there's a huge bigger picture that businesses, particularly if you want to attract the right talent as well.
Yeah.
Is it getting harder for businesses to get all of this right? Because I think it probably is. I mean, we're getting to a situation now where business leaders know that they've got to be more inclusive. We've got to get the diversity and equality bit right. We've got to think about individuals being more flexible for people, but we've also got to make money, you know, and marrying those two concerns are really quite difficult. You know, if you look on LinkedIn every day, you know, you're faced with a barrage of information, conflicting information from seemingly different sources, you know, 4-day working week, hybrid against not hybrid or whatever. And it's almost like we're looking for a model of a correct way of working, which we are not going to find, because every business is different. Every individual within every business is different. And therefore, you're talking about messiness, and sorting that messiness out and making it work is a real human thing, right? and dealing with humans is really, really quite messy. So are leaders actually really struggling with this, and this where they actually need this HR support even more than they ever did?
It is a huge balancing act, and that's all I can say is it's huge. So you've got businesses that, let's be honest, primarily need to make money, they need to make profit, etc. Then you've got the people, and let's be honest, people are brilliant but also complicate things, they can be challenging, etc. And then you've got, I suppose, if you are as an employer, you've then got the legal compliance, so getting your legal basics, complying with employment law. This possibly is going to get even further complicated by the introduction of the raft of new laws that Labour want to bring in, which will, and obviously the budget changes as well, also huge, and the cost that, it's almost a vicious circle. And then coupled with that, you've got expectations of employees as to what environment they want to work in. What are they willing to stay these days? I mean, the culture of the people's working life is that they don't stay generally at one place anymore. They move around. They aspire for more. And I'm not talking about all employees here, but generally, I've moved around. I've moved on up in different organisations, and I think people are more. They want more than just a job. Generally, they want it to be a positive working environment. They want the flexibility, and I don't envy business owners in trying to get that balance right. And I think the thing is, there can't also be a consistent approach either across it. There can't be, because each business is individual. Each has different challenges. Each has different target markets, customers, etc. So I think it's working with what works for each one and trying to find that balance. And I think sometimes to get it right, sometimes it tips one way and then it impacts something else. So it's just constant.
So what helps? What helps? Is it dialogue? I think it may be, right?
Yeah,
because I just think that like years ago, a lot of business was like owning a load of wind up toys. You got your employees in, you wound them all up, you let them go. There you go. And then, you didn't have to come back to them until they run out of wind up, and that was it. And I'm sure a lot of people were wound up at the time. But surely now, again, these days, it's more about constant dialogue in both directions to make sure that you are achieving what they want and they understand what you need out of it.
Definitely. I think communication is absolutely critical, and it has to be a two-way street. So your leaders have got to listen to your employees, is what they want, etc. But the employees have also got to take that leadership and that guidance from the top as to what they need. So all of this for me stems from your leadership team. They've got to drive the organisation, they've got to drive the culture. But in that, it's also got to be a culture of sort of trust, collaboration, communication. I almost think like you can't over communicate to an extent. It's slightly annoying for employees, if you're getting emails every single day. But at the same time, if they know what's happening in the business, they know, I suppose, where the business is heading. They could either on the bus or they're off the bus. And that's why, working in HR, the amount of conversations I had, if you don't enjoy it, go and find another job. There's no bars on the window to make anybody stay. Life's too short to be in a job you don't enjoy. So I think I always say, if someone isn't enjoying a role, try and find, the positive in a role, take it as a learning and kind of sort of move on from that. But I think, good is, like you say, having a really strong leadership team who are driving that business forward, but are also bringing their team along with them.
I also think training is really important in that aspect. Having, certain workshops around your business and like communication, teaching people standard communication, effective communication, whatever it is, having an open door policy, and then when someone comes and tells you something, and whether you like it or you don't, you listen and you act, having a viewpoint survey and putting not the easy win things that people are asking for, but, really listening to what is this that they're asking. So for instance, it could be the hours are 8 till 5:30, and people are all saying, well, because we have half an hour lunch and work 8 till 5. If 90% of your workforce is saying that, and really the detriment to the business wouldn't be much different. It's just your mindset that's just what we've always done. We'll move with the times a little bit because they're half an hour to people, and their daily life means so much more, for instance. Does that make sense? Or whatever it may be, you know. There's little things that can be easily done and changed to just make people happy, isn't it? You know,
of course.
That be keeping the office fresh. So when you walk in, the environment's inviting, it's nice, you know. Some offices want like a chill out area where they can just go and have the break and it'd be quite chilled, and you know, have beanbags there or whatever, you know, like there's just loads of different great ways that companies can do something quite cheap and effective, you know. To be listening.
And then I think the other thing is kind of that psychological safety as well. So do employees feel comfortable being honest, being open without the fear of repercussion? So have they got somebody that they can trust? And again, this also comes from leadership in the sense of, you know, promoting a culture of honesty and transparency, but also having a grounding for good policies and practices, and again, sort of ingrained in all the culture as well. But like you say, there are quick wins here, you know, and it's whether that you know, businesses are willing to listen. At the same time, I also don't envy them as well, you know, business leaders, when they're trying to, you know, we're in a challenging time for businesses as it is, costs are spiraling, etc. And you know, sometimes they need consistency across teams, and they need, you know, people in the offices just for that, you know, for the, like you say, training, for support, you know, for that team dynamic, and building that culture as well. But to trying to find that balance is massive. But like you say, I do think there are quick wins.
Yeah, we may have. Sorry, where just wouldn't work. You know, you need to be in office to speak to each other, because you're constantly asking questions. You're constantly like, "Oh, where are you up to that? What's this?" And you know, I go back to when we had to do our job in COVID. It was hard work. By the time I set everyone up in the morning, then got on with my job, I was back to speaking to them all, saying, "What have you done today?" And it was just like, you felt like you had no time to do anything, because recruitment's so fast, temporary recruitment, and it's like, "Oh, if you got this person, and if you fill that, if you like," it just wouldn't work fully, you know. Sometimes, don't get me wrong, you'd be all right with the odd person here and there, but you know, you will be on the phone constantly. So really, there is certain businesses where that's got to be, you know, that way. And people, if that's what you don't want, then you need to probably think of the industry that you're in and look for a different career change, you know.
Definitely.
One of the things I was going to ask them was, I was writing about this morning, from a culture change point of view. I noticed that a lot of business leaders going into 2025, one of the buzzwords that they're talking about and trying to enshrine and build this into their business is resilience. How do you feel like organizations build resilience into their business?
Good question, that, because I think there's two parts to it, isn't there? There's business resilience, so being resilient to the market, and then there is, I suppose, you know, then there's also personal resilience as well, so your personal resilience of employees. And I think you possibly have to, you know, address each one differently. So your business resilience, I imagine, you know, it will be a lot of the right people around the table having those conversations. What does that, you know, is it governance, financial, all of those kind of things to build that? And then from there, you then have to drive that down into the organization, again, through your leadership. And then your personal resilience, I think, again, it's creating that kind of psychological safety, that people feel comfortable in speaking up if something's not right, you know, a culture of, you know, honesty, transparency, communication, that kind of thing, having the good ground, you know, the good basics in place. So your policies, your practices, this is how we do things around here as well. But I also think there has to be a culture of, particularly from the resilience perspective, is that it's okay to not be okay. Like, people have personal stuff going on, and it's about finding that support network within, you know, everyone spends, however, you know, quite a lot of time working, don't they? So they need to kind of feel safe and supported there. So I think there's a huge amount, and it's not just sort of the EAP helplines that you can ring, you know, to ask for advice. It's actually being able to signpost people to get the help that they need if needed. And that can be anything from mental health support to financial support to, you know, if they are in a really tricky situation at home, all the way through to even in the culture itself and in the employment, the organisation itself, is who to go to for what.
Yeah.
So, for example, if someone is, really struggling with mental health, do they have mental health first aiders? Or if somebody, I don't know, has experienced, abuse at home, is there anyone that, that they can, there's a safe space there? And it's about creating that kind of culture of people feeling comfortable as well. But I think resilience, it's hard, isn't it? Because people's tolerance and resilience level are completely different depending on their kind of life experiences as well. But I think it is these days, it's more than just a helpline.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think also, though, some businesses might be a little bit scared to say how business really is, because if it's all doom and gloom and it's this, then people might bail and jump ship because they're nervous that they won't have a job and they won't this. So, some people, may hold back on some information for them reasons as well, and it's not to try and hide things, but it might just because they've got the resilience to get through it. Yep. So it's trying to maybe say, look, at the times are hard. However, we've got X, Y, and Z in place, and we've got this here that can help us do that. So don't be worrying about what the future holds. We're going to have a little bumpy ride for a few months or whatever.
It's that fine line, isn't it, between being vulnerable and looking weak.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is it's the, people, businesses all go through challenging times, don't they? But I suppose if you are going to communicate that to the businesses, we're on a bumpy road and times are hard, but this is the plan and this is how we're planning to resolve that. That's how we're getting out of that. And that is absolutely critical, because let's be honest, we all know, everybody, we're all feeling the effects of cost of living, everything else, and let's be honest, things aren't going down, so you can imagine what that also means for businesses as well. And I think a lot of it is about how we're going to resolve the problem that we've got.
It's totally that, isn't it? It's not a case of say it went wrong, say it went wrong, but say what you learned from it. Say what you're now doing right.
Definitely.
So say it's hard. say that it's going to be a struggle, but show what the plan is. You've got to communicate a lot more, which means that you've got to have those conversations before you put information out there, and you've got to be aware of exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think it's got.
So going back to questions from an interview, question I always ask, I'll ask someone what their opportunities are as well as their strengths, because I think you as an individual need to be aware of what you're not so good at as well, because that would be my job as your boss, to help you get better and grow and develop, and a lot of people will say, oh yeah, I love feedback of this, and then when you're delivering it can be the other way around, got it at times, and so because we're all want to do well, we naturally get defensive. Nobody likes to hear negative stuff, but it's not always unicorns and rainbows, is it? You've got to have some of them, kinds of conversations with people and stuff. So, it's getting people to maybe I think the best performance reviews are a 360 review, where you assess yourself as well as the employee assesses you, because it makes you think about yourself and getting feedback from other people within the business, not just your line manager or whoever.
Oh, peer-to-peer assessment within a business is and do you know what I think is the best assessment process as well, is where people ask for it.
Yep.
I still amazes me that in this day and age, most assessment process is still tiered down with someone saying you've got to have an assessment process, right? Whereas we should be encouraging right from day one an attitude of, I want to ask for assessment. I want to ask for feedback constantly from everyone that's around me, because I want to grow. But we don't encourage that. We kind of, but still out there to this day, there's still far too many companies where assessment happens once a year. It's suddenly a shock, and and it's like, well, here's all the things that you did wrong last year. It's like, well, you didn't tell me. But actually, if we gave people the opportunity to constantly ask for assessment, they feel in control of it.
Well, that's what do in McDonald's, we'd have hick chats, how's it going? So when you'd have an open door policy, so it was like that constantly, you know, within such a big organisation. So your performance review was never a surprise. I've grew up in that type of culture and that environment, so I'm 100% with you on that, Graham, because we always pretty much knew where we were at.
McDonald's were always good at flipping it.
Say that again?
I said McDonald's were always good at flipping it.
yeah. No, but going back, that all goes back to everything we spoke about. This culture is your performance review shouldn't just be that once a year. It's an ongoing process, isn't it? It's always talking to your staff and just saying, how are you doing? How's life? How are you getting on?
I kind of have a rule is that nothing should ever come as a surprise.
Yeah.
And that is kind of, you know, that's when I'm speaking with business leaders, with anybody really, but also myself as well. And I think it's, you know, feedback is huge in development. And I think for, you know, employees and particularly kind of, I suppose, your frontline, maybe minimum wage employees, they kind of view it as a bit of a waste of time and what does development mean for them. But I think, Diane, we've had this conversation, is people's perception of development is completely individual to them. Some people will want to progress and become the director, the managing director. Some people, their development is just being the best, doing the best of their job, and, you know, being the best that they can be in that role, and they, you know, they're quite happy where they are. But I think the most successful businesses I see are where feedback and where you know, performance, it isn't a performance conversation, it is a one-to-one conversation going, this is where I think you've kind of done, you know, well, and this is where we can potentially work on. But again, it's having those honest conversations and fostering an environment where you can actually people feel comfortable and they don't see it as a personal attack, because I think that's where I think there's still work to be done, is that feedback, you know, negative feedback is negative, but it's not necessarily negative. This, you know, it shouldn't be viewed as negative. It's actually a potential to develop, and it's about changing that perception as well. But my number one rule is that nothing should come as a surprise.
And that is a great place to leave it today. Thank you, Rachel, for joining us for this conversation. Rachel, if people want to get hold of you so that they can find out a bit more, where's the best place?
Fab. So you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Rachel Donnelly, and I run Collaborate HR Consultancy. I also have a website, collaboratehr.co.uk, or you're welcome to email me, which is rachel@collaboratehr.co.uk. But any questions, any concerns, you know where I am.
I'm sure there will be. Thank you. And thank you for listening. Hope you've enjoyed that. Another great conversation. And we always enjoy finding out a little bit more about what it is that people do. If you've got any questions for Rachel, do let us know, and we will always pass them on to her if not. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Thank you.